This is an unrehearsed program. The views expressed are those of the guests and not necessarily those of the producer. Today's topic:
Power of the Illegal Immigrants in the Passion for Truth award-winning programs.
Welcome to another edition of Passion for Truth. Illegal immigrants and their supporters recently presented a case to the American public that they are vital to the country's economy and should not be subject to deportation. Should it be a felony if they are in the United States illegally? We are going to ask our panelists next. Fred Peterson from the Institute of Religion and Public Policy, Chuck Woolery, formerly with the World Federalist Association. The objective of the World Federal Association is to strengthen the UN currently former chair also of the United Nations Association. And Dr. Amarjeet Singh, Director, Voices for Freedom, also a columnist for several newspapers. Dr. Dennis Warner, a representative of Pax Christi, the International Catholic Peace Movement, also a senior technical advisor to Catholic Relief Services, which provides assistance to 100 countries in the world, or more than 100 countries in the world. Bob Price, one of the leading attorneys in the Washington metropolitan area. Welcome you all.
Thank you.
What are these illegals demonstrating, Bob?
What are they demonstrating? What are they demonstrating for? Our country has for many years allowed them to enter legally, illegally. I mean, we certainly knew what was happening. No one took any real action to try and enforce the laws on the border. And since the late 90s, they have never, except for a very short period of time, enforced employer sanctions. So we would kind of look the other way as people came into the country. And it wasn't until 9/11 that we realized how porous and vulnerable we are to people walking across the border from either north or south. So there was a huge move afoot now to suddenly deport all of these people. The House of Representatives, led by the Republicans, passed, or didn't pass, but did a draft bill that would make it a felony for anyone that was here illegally. The problem with that is they would not only criminalize all of these people, but they would immediately deport them if found. With a felony, it would make it very difficult, if not impossible, for them to return to the United States at some point. A lot of these people have been here for many years. Some of them have already begun the process to become permanent residents, but because of the huge backlog, they're not permanent residents. They entered illegally. They're allowed to stay here and work, and since 2001, file, if they filed prior to 2001, file for permanent residence, even though they really don't have any status yet. So the argument really is, do we want to take all of these people that our country has allowed to come, rightfully or wrongly? Certainly, many of them, thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of them, would begun the process.
Okay, let me come back to you. Dennis, what do you make of the argument here that the illegal immigrants supply America with low-wage workers, they are willing to do unskilled jobs, that Americans here won't do it?
Well, I think that argument is true in many ways. They do supply us with workers, and many of the jobs are low paid, but these are jobs that need to be filled. There wouldn't be such a mass rush into the United States if there weren't opportunities for them to earn money, send funds back to their families and their communities in their home countries. So these jobs are the magnets that are drawing them, and the jobs, for various reasons, are not attracting Americans to do it. This is a problem, or not a problem, it's a situation that many countries have. Most of the Western European countries have the same situation. They need workers to do jobs that their own citizens are unwilling to do.
Are we establishing, Dr. Singh, then another class of poor people in our country by having them come here, do the unskilled job that the native-born Americans don't want to do?
I think if 9/11 wouldn't have occurred, even this immigration debate, which is now on the streets of United States, wouldn't have happened. in the 1980s, during the time of President Reagan, they legalized 6 million people under amnesty program of those who were here until 81, and then there was a SAW program, Special Agriculture Worker Program. And since then, for the past 20 years, there hasn't been any amnesty or any such program. So if 20 years ago almost 6 million people could have been legalized, what's the problem with now 11 million? So I think this polarization, and particularly insecurity in the minds of most of the Americans after 9/11, this is being played by both sides, Democrats and Republicans. On the other hand, I think the fact of the matter is that in California, the agriculture industry wouldn't survive if there wouldn't have been Mexican workers there. And that is where, when they approved SAW program, they realized that that is the reality. And now the same is true in the industrial sector as well. So I think at this time, whoever is in the United States of America, you can't throw him out. There has to be, they should come up with some legislation, some sort of arrangement, so that they are legalized, but for future they should come up with some regulation so that this unchecked flow of illegal people is stopped somewhere.
But should the businesses, Chuck, be prosecuted for giving a day off to the illegals to participate in protest, to participate in march in favor of immigration legislation?
That was probably a good idea. I had a friend in Seattle who gave me a great solution to this whole thing. He said, look, all you have to do is just give illegal immigrants $50,000 for every American businessman that hires them that they turn in. If you did that, the problem would be solved. You know, look, this is a really complicated and important issue, and it's full of all kinds of energy and emotion, but I want to try to take an analytical approach and look at just some of the basic elements. First of all, there's two problems here. One problem is that of the 12 million that are here, what are we going to do with them? And the other problem is the 12 million, the next 12 million, we don't want to come in. So there's those two problems. The other thing is that there's two basic factors. There are pull factors that pull immigrants here, and there are push factors that push them out of their countries. So when you look at that particular aspect of the problem, you come up with three basic areas of approach. One, we can either deal with them here, we can try to stop them at the border, or we can improve the quality of life of where they're coming from to stop them coming. And if you take the economic perspective on this, the cheapest, most effective way to deal with this problem is not here, not at the border, it's actually to deal with the push factors. If you could deal with the push factors, you'd have some success in dealing with this. If you don't deal with the push factors, it's going to get very expensive and it ain't going to work.
Well, Fred, what do you make of it? Does the federal government have an obligation to enforce the nation's immigration laws and investigate the businesses that have hired the illegals, what do you recommend, a patchwork approach for the state level?
I'd like to reiterate what Charles said. I think that was very perceptive, and that is precisely where the problem is. There is, what is a borderline? A borderline is an imaginary line in the sand, and you take one step over that borderline and you can multiply your wage opportunity by 10 times or more. You can change your opportunity for your family to succeed and to grow and to live in a country of law, or you can step back over that borderline and be a permanent underclass, which much of our southern neighbor is, a permanent underclass, where you have a very few at the top of the society, the Robbie Blanco, I believe they call in certain Latin cultures, which have all of the power and all of the money, and you have the vast underclass that is seeking opportunity, good people, and they make good residents and good workers in the United States. How do we regulate this? That borderline, if it is to mean anything at all, must mean something in fact. And it must be enforced first before we address the other two issues. But I quite agree there is an endemic issue of economic opportunity that does not exist for the vast majority in south of our border, and a problem of what to do with the closer to 15 million illegals who jumped the line and jumped our law ahead and are here now.
Dennis?
But the first priority is sealing the border and regulating what crosses, particularly in time of war.
How do you react, Dennis?